Before Spider-Man, Marvel Rivals, Guardians of the Galaxy, and Injustice Gods Among Us, we had Superman, Aquaman, Iron Man, and the Fantastic Four. This was the dark ages of superhero video games. Superhero games were the live service games of the early 2000s. After a string of superhero video game flops, how could an unknown studio bring Batman to life with just 60 people?
Bringing Batman to life, that's easy. Killing him is the hard part.
But EA would fail at their own Batman game with a much bigger veteran studio. More on that later. 2004 in Highgate, London, Jamie Walker and Sefton Hill started a company from the remnants of Argonaut Games, and thus Rocksteady is born. Not that Rocksteady. Rocksteady Studios was starting their first game, Urban Chaos Riot Response, a first-person shooter that's set in a dystopian near future with a gritty atmosphere where you play a police officer stopping riots and violence.
Chaos, violence, atmosphere. Should have gotten a perfect 10 if you ask me.
A 3 out of 5.
The game was developed in little over a year with a small team. It received mixed reviews, but it demonstrated Rocksteady's potential and technical competence. And after the release of Urban Chaos, the team at Rocksteady started working on prototypes for Unreal Engine 3 for the PS3 and the Xbox 360 as proofs of concept. Meanwhile, at Warner Brothers, they were working on their own Batman game in secret. Remember that secret part, because that'll be important later. Warner Brothers game is a movie tie-in for the upcoming Christopher Nolan Dark Knight film. The game will be handled by the team at Pandemic Games and published by EA. This seems like a good time to go look back and see what people were saying about superhero games at that time. We have IGN calling Superman a mutant that moves like a couch in Superman 64. Strangely, he seems to be neither faster than a speeding bullet nor more powerful than a locomotive. Then we have the Fantastic Four not being all that fantastic. Fantastic Four feels like one of those games where the developers simply ran out of time. The controls are poor, the camera's difficult to manage, and it grows old quickly. We all love RDJ's Iron Man, but NeoGaf didn't like his game. You never feel like Iron Man in this game, you never feel like you're having fun. Then you have user Chansey289 on the Devil May Cry forum talking about Batman. Arkham were like the first Batman games that were actually good. Well, I liked the Batman game for the NES, but he didn't have a good game sense. They were f***ing awful. Then we have a user from R Gaming talking about Aquaman Battle for Atlantis. Every copy should be buried in the ocean where it belongs.
The only thing worse than being punched by a dolphin is being punched by a dolphin in an Aquaman game from 2004.
Jokes aside, I just want to say no one wants to make a bad video game. A lot of these were tie-in games to movies and TV shows, and the developers didn't have the time to make a good video game, let alone the game that they wanted to make in the first place. But it's no secret that the opinions on superhero games were very high. Realizing this, Warner Brothers decides to hedge its bets and have another Batman game being made along with Pandemic's secret Batman game. This new game wouldn't be based off of a show or movie, but instead, it would be an original story based off of the comic book lore. Warner Brothers reached out to Eidos Interactive, who then in turn reached out to Rocksteady. Despite it not being a blockbuster hit, Eidos was really impressed with Urban Chaos Riot Response because of its polished look and quick turnaround time. Eidos was also really impressed with Rocksteady's recent Unreal Engine 3 prototypes. According to Sefton Hill, they explained that they had the rights to develop the game using the core Batman license, not one based off a particular movie or TV show, and asked if we were interested in pitching for it. Whatever was said in that pitch meeting, it was good enough for a small company with only one game under their belt to start working on Batman Arkham Asylum with only 40 people. And the road ahead would still be filled with a lot of obstacles. For the setting, they chose Arkham Asylum. According to Jamie Walker, it's a great setting for a game, being in the belly of the beast, and re-reference the tone of Morrison's Arkham Asylum to infuse a lot of that feeling. And Arkham Asylum just wasn't an interesting location. It solved a problem that other superhero video games had. They would usually try to shove as many villains in the game as possible, but by having the game take place within the asylum, it gave it an in-world explanation to why Batman would run into so many of its rogues gallery in one night. In Batman Arkham Asylum, the design of the asylum itself plays a pivotal role in immersing the players into Batman's world. Rocksteady Studios envisioned the asylum as an island complex reminiscent of Alcatraz. The medical facilities had a gothic vibe reminiscent of old gothic paintings that depicted dark and horrific things. The catacombs are, well, scary, they're catacombs. They were designed to be dark, claustrophobic, and oppressive.
Like your relationship, you deserve better.
The maximum security area was designed to resemble a fortified bunker, emphasizing containment and security. The Arkham Mansion exhibited a high Gothic style. No, wrong creepy mansion. The Arkham Mansion exhibited high Gothic style. The mansion serves as the administrative center and a mixture of horror and mystery. Within the first 5 months of development, Rocksteady had a working prototype of the game.
We'll build
the whole game as quickly as we possibly can in a very, very basic format. So we'll basically build a whole, over the course of sort of 5, 6, 7 months, very basic version of the whole game that we can play. And that rapid prototyping is really important to us, because the quicker you can get an idea and evaluate it, the quicker you can make a decision about whether it should be in the game or not.
This is very different from what pandemic games were going through. Despite it being an adaptation of The Dark Knight, the team didn't see any part of the movie until a year into development, which impeded their ability to work on gameplay and plot elements. However, Rocksteady had creative freedom. Not being tied to an existing medium, Rocksteady had freedom to create their story, which for them was a godsend since they were all Batman fans. They knew they needed to draw on Batman's long 70-year history to create their game. The team also made the decision to not play any previous Batman games and decided to build Arkham Asylum from the ground up based on their ideas on who Batman was as a character and adapting his mythos to the video game medium. To help them flesh out these ideas, Warner Bros. Reached out to legendary Batman writer Paul Dini. One of the main challenges for Dini and Rocksteady was figuring out which of Batman's rogue gallery would be in the asylum. They knew early on that the Joker would be the main villain, but the rest of the Batman villains went through a sort of reading out process. Paul Dini would say, "We thought, well, this is a scary location. Who is big and scary? Who can we draw on? There are a number of heavy hitters who are all lurking in the shadows of Arkham. So it's a very physical challenge for Batman to go through all these levels." The goal was to have the worst of the worst, and thereby the most interesting characters. The type of characters that make you glad that supervillains aren't real.
Eat gogs! Supervillains aren't real! Now that's funny. As we speak, there's some demagogue, warlord, egotistical billionaire, Girl Scout with daddy issues, or politician responsible for killing millions of people, but because they're not wearing brightly colored spandex and giving evil monologues. You don't even know you need to be saved.
Each of the villains provided a new challenge for Batman. The Joker, through his overarching narrative and his constant manipulation of the environment and other villains, he orchestrates the entire takeover of Arkham Asylum, setting the stage for Batman's challenges. The Scarecrow's contribution to gameplay centered around the psychological horror and mind-bending hallucinatory sequences. His encounters shift the gameplay from direct combat and stealth to navigating surreal and distorted environments. Bane represents a direct physical threat and serves as a powerful boss encounter. His gameplay contribution lies in forcing the player to adapt their combat strategies to overcome his immense strength. Killer Croc gameplay's contribution focuses on stealth and environmental awareness. The gameplay shifts to a predator-prey dynamic. The Riddler is entirely based on intellectual challenges rather than direct combat, focusing mostly on puzzles. Poison Ivy's gameplay revolves around environmental hazards as she controls plant life. Victor Zsasz' gameplay is through sudden, intense close-quarters encounters. He appears unexpectedly, taking hostages and forcing Batman to time stealth challenges. Harley Quinn serves as the Joker's main accomplice and reoccurring antagonist throughout the game. And as more villains were added, it posed an interesting question for the gameplay and the story. Was Batman trapped in the asylum with them? Or
They were trapped in there with me.
Batman's design was heavily influenced by Jim Lee, who was illustrating the comic book at the time. They would combine hyper-realism and stylized design to create Batman's aesthetic. The art director David Higo would say, "One of the big advantages to stylized realism was we were jumping across the uncanny valley. By making the characters so stylized, you can forget about uncanny valley because you accept that it's not real." With Batman's design set, they needed to work on his animation. To butcher a quote from Bruce Lee, Batman needed to be like water. His animations needed to be responsive and fluid, one animation flowing into the next. And Rocksteady took extra care into animating his cape. His cape was like a character all of its own. It would receive damage from enemies to help tell the story where Batman had been, each encounter leaving a mark to help tell his story. Along with that, the cape took one person 2 years and 700 plus animations to animate.
Oh, I see. Batman's cape gets 700 animations, and I get Jack Nicholson's hairline.
And apart from his design, Rocksteady needed to empower players to be Batman, a master of stealth, without making him feel weak. Stealth was thought to be too passive. No, Batman doesn't hide, he hunts. So they created the Invisible Predator mode. These encounters were built as dynamic puzzles where players could clear rooms of armed thugs using fear and gadgets. This required players to assess where each of the bad guys were in the room and plan the best way of attack, while avoiding being seen in gunfire. This resulted in Batman stalking and picking off his foes one after another, but direct confrontation couldn't be avoided. In a fight, players needed to feel powerful without making the game too easy. This made combat particularly hard to design. An early Scrat version even experimented with rhythm action combat, where players would time punches to musical beats. The idea was that the music was playing and Batman would fight in time with the music, The camera would cut and you would have to punch on the beat to connect, or you'd end up getting hit. If you had multiple enemies, you'd have to branch off into another piece of music that would seamlessly blend into a combo attack. Despite this making it pretty far into development, they realized how limiting and complicated it made combat. This led to the design philosophy, simple for Batman, easy for the player. The idea being, if Batman can perform the move effortlessly in fiction, the player shouldn't struggle with complex inputs to do the same. It was about not being limited by which animations can link together or by having to learn combos to do the move. It was about being free to perform any move at any time. This meant designing a simple yet intuitive control scheme, one button for strike, one for counter, that lets any attack flow into the next. This is where the animation blending came in. So Batman could seamlessly vault, punch, counter, and kick into one continuous combo. The team spent weeks tuning this system to feel great in the hands of the player. This also meant resisting the urge to prioritize making fights flashy instead of focusing on tight gameplay. This meant snappy input responses and smooth transitions so that Batman reacts instantly. As a result, combat with Batman enabled him to strike, counter, evade at will, chaining moves without pause. This made combat free-flowing. Despite the accessible controls, the developers were careful to add depth and challenge. The system was tuned that so matching attack mindlessly caused the combos to drop and leave Batman open for hits. Enemies were designed with varying behaviors and vulnerabilities to keep combat engaging. Thugs would try to surround Batman, and tougher enemies carried knives, stun batons, and guns that punished the player for using the wrong move at the wrong time. Hill said the free flow system was designed with Batman in mind to make the player feel like the ultimate melee combat master when they pick up and play. The result was a combat system that allowed you to fold your enemies like cheap furniture, but only in a non-lethal way. Because Arkham Asylum's development was a synergy between the gameplay and Batman's lore and mythos, DC and Warner Brothers made it clear early on that Batman could not kill under any circumstances. Hill would explain that Batman's mixture of power and vulnerability was key. He's incredible, but yet he can't kill. So it's much more challenging to create gameplay that allows the player to have complete freedom without transgressing on who Batman is.
Oh, I say let him. What's the worst that could happen?
Make no mistake, I'll do whatever I have to stop my foes, but they all suffer from some form of psychosis. What would that make me if I crossed that line with sick people? And what does that say about those that would want me to?
He said something about me, didn't he?
This meant designing every attack and environment so the bad guys only got knocked out, but never eliminated. This meant checking for accidental eliminations. For example, what if a baddie fell off a ledge and into a pit during combat? Oh, we tried to push the boundaries and they kept pushing back, so enemies falling unconscious pretty much happened from the start. Rocksteady had to toddler-proof the levels to prevent accidents. They coded invisible barriers at cliff edges and made sure no gargoyles or perches were placed above lethal drops. Even with these precautions, testers sometimes felt downed enemies still didn't look like they were alive. The fix? The developers added subtle chest movements to unconscious enemies and on-screen unconscious status tags to detective vision to reassure players and DC that foes were merely knocked out. Rocksteady carefully considered every aspect of what made Batman Batman. Paul Crocker, the lead narrative designer, would say, "From the very beginning, we set out in a very deliberate way to identify the Batman character traits that would translate well into the game. He's a master of hand-to-hand fighting, he uses stealth, and his deductive skills are unmatched. Once we got those, we just kept on concentrating on them. Even at the early days, those things worked. As we went on, they just got better looking and more refined."
They were working on combat and stealth, but they wanted to work on something that hadn't been focused on in a Batman game before. My detective skills.
The answer was Detective Mode. Detective Mode was implemented as an augmented reality overlay through Batman's cowl, when activated, allowing Batman to see through walls. Enemies are highlighted as skeletal silhouettes, color-coded based on threat. It outlines interactive objects in the environment, such as weak walls that can be destroyed, ventilation grates, and usable gadgets. Throughout the story, players must switch on Detective Mode to investigate crime scenes, scanning fingerprints, following trails of tobacco or blood, and analyzing evidence to advance the plot. The developers originally prototyped a much more complex forensic system during early development, but many features were cut for simplicity. They spent 4 months prototyping at the beginning of the project, and a lot of it was for the forensics, but ultimately most of it was left out because it didn't fit the direction the game was going. One of the biggest challenges with Detective Mode was preventing it from undermining the game's visual immersion and difficulty. In practice, Detective Mode proved so advantageous that many players kept it on virtually all the time, or because they hated the blinding white light when they turned it on.
Rocksteady's art director, David Hego, later said it was a misstep. Hego joked, that hearing how some fans never saw the game's normal graphics made him want to cry a little bit. Wait a minute. If that thing can see through walls, Batman is a pervert.
Meanwhile, at Pandemic Games, the studio was getting the first look at the Joker in Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight film, which would change the direction of their game. They would transition to a very ambitious idea of making it an open-world Batman game. They also decided to use the Odin video game engine. But with the increased scope of the game and combined with the team's difficulty in using the Odin engine, led to delays. The point of a tie-in movie game is for it to be released alongside of the movie. But Pandemic, like Rocksteady, didn't want to make another cash grab game, but wanted to make a great game. But unlike Rocksteady, Pandemic wasn't getting the time or support that they needed. They didn't get to see any of the movie until 2007, when the movie was released in 2008. And after finding out the direction, they felt switching it to an open-world game was the best way to replicate the feel of Christopher Nolan's film. And to this point, they were working on a much more linear game similar to that of Batman Begins, a game which Christopher Nolan himself didn't like too much. This switch in direction and technical difficulties during development led to the game being delayed and missing the theatrical release of The Dark Knight. By this point, Pandemic Games had been acquired by EA Games, so EA decided to push the release of the game to coincide with the release of the DVD, which put even more pressure on the team because they only had the license for The Dark Knight for 18 months, and time was running out. And then this happened.
The video game, I saw a tiny little piece of it. They're trying to get it so that when he's gliding, that it's a sort of, there's a feeling in it that you've never really felt before, that the game doesn't stop and start. They're trying to build it in to the system, almost like watching the film.
Yeah, remember earlier when I said they were working on the game in secret? Well, with the bat out of the bag.
Jeez, and here I thought my puns were bad.
And development still in turmoil, and their license running out, EA and Warner Brothers made the decision to cancel the Dark Knight game despite all the work that Pandemic Games had put into it. Dark Knight being canceled didn't improve the public's opinion on superhero games, but Rocksteady had a secret weapon.
So a lot of people associate my voice with the character just because I've done it longer than anyone else and because I was the voice of the cartoon.
With Warner Brothers' support, Rocksteady was able to get 3 legendary actors from Batman the Animated Series: Kevin Conroy, Arlene Sorkin, and Mark Hamill. Not only were they lending their immense talent, but their presence and association with Batman the Animated Series helped legitimize the game among fans. First trailer for Batman Arkham Asylum was released. Hearing Batman's gruff voice traverse dark corridors accompanied by the Joker's trademark laughter sent a jolt of excitement through fans.
Oh, the laugh isn't such a big deal. You also need everything around the laugh to make it work. So, for instance, if I just laugh and the camera goes to black, it's weird but not impactful. And if I say I'm going to escape and the camera goes to black, sure, it's slightly ominous, but it lacks bite. But if I say, I'm going to escape...
What did he just say?
With the voice actors and combat in place, the game just needed a story to carry it across the finish line. It started when DC asked Paul Dini, if you were writing a Batman movie or brand new graphic novel that was designed for gameplay, how would you go about doing it? Dini was intrigued by the idea because it was a unique challenge to create an all-new story for a game. Though the game wasn't based off of any existing storyline, they did draw inspiration from existing media. For the tone and feel of the game, the team was heavily inspired by Batman's Serious House on Serious Earth by Grant Morrison, a comic book that had Batman lured and trapped inside Arkham Asylum, where he would have to go through a gauntlet of his foes. Despite this very bare-bones synopsis, that's where the similarities end. Otherwise, the game goes in a wildly different direction with its story and plot. Denny would say, it sounded very intriguing to me because at this point, most of the Batman games weren't original. I think they were like a handful that did not owe their existence to a movie or a TV show or something like that. DC really wanted to create something right from the ground up, but build it around very familiar Batman elements. That might be a problem. But speaking of problems, despite not playing other Batman games, Rocksteady was still able to avoid a problem that those other games ran into. A lot of those games felt restricted when it came to using Batman's gadget. Arkham Asylum gave the player freedom by allowing you to use your gadgets anytime you wanted. Grapple points are abundant, your batarangs are infinite. Some items are attained as you progress through the game, but once you have them, you can use them how you see fit. Most gadgets were taken directly from the Batman comics, but one new item was explosive gel. Once applied to a surface, Batman could detonate it remotely for knocking down walls, taking out enemies, or for distractions. Most of his gadgets, in fact, were versatile. Batarangs could be used to hit enemies or to distract. The zipline could be used to get across long distances or to take out multiple enemies at once. While other games gave you restrictions, Arkham Asylum gave you choices. Batman Arkham Asylum was released August 25th, 2009, revitalized the franchise, and broke over a decades-long superhero curse.
What can I say? I throw a good party.
And unfortunately, in 2009, Pandemic Games, which was now owned by EA, laid off a large portion of their company that worked on the Dark Knight video game. And even today, the superhero video game genre has had its ups.
Spider-Man. Look, next time, leave the fighting to the pros.
And downs.
I didn't want to do it. Plus, I think it was a clone of something.
In 2024, Rocksteady released Suicide Squad: Kill the Justice League, a third-person shooter live service spin-off of the original Arkham Asylum games, where you play the Suicide Squad as you kill Batman and the rest of the Justice League. Allegedly.
Now that's comedy. Imagine playing as the same character for the better part of a decade just to end up being forced to shoot them in the head? Why didn't I think of that?
Needless to say, fans were less than happy with the game, and it contributed to a $200 million loss for Warner Brothers and layoffs to Rocksteady. But rumor has it that Rocksteady is currently working on a new single-player Batman game. Just a rumor. But let's hope whatever happens, Rocksteady can right the ship that they helped build.
If you're not careful, sometimes victory can defeat you.
And I'm a huge Batman fan. Some of the first videos I did on YouTube was a Batman motion comic that I made with some of my friends. And this video feels like a spiritual successor of sorts. In fact, some of the people that worked on that motion comic did voices for this video. So I've been really excited to bring this to all of you.